They saw her first as a shape in the frost, motionless breath barely stirring the air, her body curled tight beside the fence line of a silent playground. Children's laughter had long faded from that place, but still, she waited. No collar, no name, just the eyes of something that had once been loved and hadn't yet given up. This story will follow the quiet grief of a dog who refused to walk away, and the baby whose tiny presence rewrote everything. Like, share, and tell us where in the world you are watching from today. It begins in winter. Not the kind from postcards, not the soft white blankets or holiday lights, but the bitter kind. The kind that finds every weakness in the skin, that slips into your lungs like regret. It had snowed 2 days ago, then froze hard. The old playground behind the church hadn't seen footprints since. Just the slow settling of cold and silence. That's where we first saw her. She didn't bark, didn't move, didn't even raise her head when the sun came up gray and reluctant through the trees. Just lay there, spine curled in a broken arc beside the baby swing, like she'd placed herself there for a reason, as if she belonged beside it. At first, we thought she was dead. I remember how her fur stuck to the frost-rimed ground, matted at the hips, stiff along the spine, a hint of blood in the snow. Not fresh, not urgent, just old, like something that had already scabbed over, forgotten by everyone but her. No one had seen her arrive, but there she was, a full-grown German shepherd, lean from hunger, eyes hollow with more than just fatigue. Her breathing was shallow, barely visible against the cold. A few wrappers had blown against her flank, the kind from a child's lunchbox, and she hadn't brushed them off. I crouched down, maybe 10 feet away. Not to approach, just to look. That close I could see it in her eyes, the pull of memory. She wasn't just cold. She was remembering something she couldn't leave behind. She kept staring toward the swings. They weren't moving. There was no sound but the brittle chime of ice in the wind. I didn't speak. You don't speak to grief when it's curled up like that. You just sit with it. There was something about the way her body was positioned. She wasn't lying at random. She'd curled beside the low metal bar like it was a crib, like she was guarding something that wasn't there anymore. I checked for a tag. Nothing, but under the fur near her ear, I saw a thin, silvery scar, straight, surgical, too deliberate to be an accident. It caught the light when she shifted. I don't know why that made me feel something deeper. Maybe it meant she had belonged to someone once, someone who had cared, at least enough to try to fix what had broken. Now no one was here, except her, and the faint trail of paw prints that circled the playground once, then led back to the same spot, like she'd tried to walk away and changed her mind. She hadn't eaten. That much was clear, but she didn't move when I slid a small foil packet of turkey sandwich leftovers toward her. Not a flinch, not a glance. The only thing she reacted to was the sound of a baby crying in the distance. Not even close. Maybe a block away, muffled behind walls and snowfall. But her ears fell not just alert, haunted. She lifted her head then, not to me, not to the food, but toward the sound. I remember how slowly she moved, like every inch of her body was asking permission. Her legs trembled under her, but she rose, and then she just stood there, looking toward the direction of the cry, silent, still. And then she lay back down, facing the swing, facing whatever memory had nailed her to this place, like a ghost refusing to pass on. I stayed an hour. She never left. And when I finally walked away, I remember feeling something twist behind my ribs. Not fear, not pity, just knowing she hadn't just found a place to die. She was waiting for something or someone. Soft and beat. By dusk, the playground was swallowed in the shadows again. Wind tugged at the caution tape that had long since fallen from the monkey bars. And the dog, still unnamed, still unmoving, curled again beneath the swing. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from sleep, but from holding on to Something you can't let go. By the time I stepped outside again, frost had laced the playground. Fence. The sun hadn't climbed past the rooftops yet, and the world was still colored in that early blue-gray, the kind that makes silence feel heavier. Like the sky is holding its breath. She was still there. Same position. Same unblinking watchfulness. The German shepherd hadn't moved an inch from where she lay beside the swing, her muzzle resting against one foreleg, breath leaving faint clouds against the cold gravel. I carried a folded towel under my arm, and a chipped bowl of warmed chicken broth. I don't know why it wasn't logic that moved me, but something older than that. Something deeper, like muscle memory for grief. Like the part of you that responds before your brain gives permission. She lifted her head when I stepped off the curb. Not fast, not startled. Just slow, cautious eyes on mine, unreadable. I held. Still. Her ears twitched. I noticed then how torn they were. The left one split at the tip, not fresh but not old either. The scars on her legs weren't random. They weren't road rash or the stray marks of long-term neglect. They looked like stories, fights, escape, survival. I crouched a few feet away and set the bowl down between us. The steam curled upward. Like smoke. She didn't approach. The wind moved through the empty playground. A single swing creaked again, slower this time, like it was tired. Above us, behind the fogged pane of glass on the third floor, the baby's silhouette appeared. The German shepherd noticed before I did. Her ears leaned forward. Her whole body tensed, not in fear, but in focus. The baby touched the window with both hands, the glass fogged slightly beneath them. Then, he just stood there, watching her. And her watching him. There was no sound but the wind. No one else stirred. The city was still asleep. But the air between them was like a thread had been pulled taut. I wanted to understand it. But some things don't explain themselves right away. Some things aren't ready to be spoken aloud. She looked back at the bowl. Then at me. Still unmoving, I whispered, "It's all right. No one's going to hurt you." She blinked slowly. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it wasn't a refusal either. After a minute, she pushed herself up, one leg stiff, the movement slow and painful. She limped forward 2 steps, just enough to reach the bowl, and drank. Every swallow looked like it cost her something, but she didn't stop. I didn't speak again. I didn't move. I just watched her ribs expand, contract. Her nose was speckled with old scabs. Her eyes were sunken but bright, somehow like something inside was still looking for the shape of meaning in the world. When she finished, she sat. Not laid down, sat, facing the window again, and I swear to you, that baby hasn't moved either. He was still there, face and palms pressed to the glass. Watching her like she was the only thing left in the world that made sense. The towel stayed in my lap. She didn't need it yet. She wasn't ready. So I just sat with her, 2 full hours, until the light shifted and the city began to wake. Later that day, I asked the woman in apartment 3C, the one who always carries her groceries in a red net bag and smokes out the side stairwell, if she knew who the dog belonged to. She shook her head without looking up. "Showed up yesterday," she muttered. "Some junkyard mutt, probably. People dump them here all the time." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. She wasn't a junkyard dog. Anyone with eyes could see that. There was something dignified in her posture, even when she was broken. Something intentional in the way she moved or didn't move. She didn't look at people like she wanted food or help. She looked at them like she was waiting for something very specific. Something most of us didn't have. Later that evening, I watched her from my window. She hadn't wandered off. She didn't explore or bark at passing cars. She didn't chase squirrels or snarl at the neighbor's yapping dachshund. She just stayed. Always by the fence. Always. Within sight of the window above. The boy's mother didn't open the blinds. But sometimes, the light behind them flickered, as if she were standing just out of view. trying to decide if seeing something meant you had to respond. It snowed lightly. That night, thin flakes that melted before they hit the sidewalk. I couldn't sleep. Somewhere around 2 a.m. I went downstairs again, wrapped in my thickest coat, carrying a wool blanket this time. She didn't lift her head until I was almost at the fence. I stopped just short of the swing. Her breath was slower now, steadier. She'd eaten more broth earlier in the day, along with pieces of boiled egg I'd left. Her eyes followed me, but she didn't flinch as I knelt again. "I don't know what you want," I whispered, "but I think I know who you're here for." She blinked. I laid the blanket a foot away and sat beside it. We stayed like that for hours. The next morning, a maintenance truck pulled into the lot. The manager had noticed her. Someone had complained that there was a stray dog camped by the fence, making people nervous. She didn't bark when they approached, didn't growl or snap when one of the men whistled and shook a can of dry kibble. She didn't move. She only stood slowly, shakily, and placed herself between the swing and the building. Between the men and the window. The baby wasn't there. This time, the glass was empty. But she stood guard anyway. They tried to coax her, then to usher her. She didn't budge. I came out of the building before they could call animal control. "She's not hurting anyone," I said, quieter than I meant to. "She hasn't moved more than a few feet in 2 days." One of the men shrugged. "She's a stray. She's watching the baby in 3B. He gave me a sideways glance. "What, like a nanny dog?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but she's not dangerous. She's waiting." He muttered something under his breath and walked off, shaking his head. I waited until their truck pulled away before stepping to the fence again. She was watching me. This time, I didn't speak. Instead, I reached out just barely fingers low and slow toward her shoulder. She flinched, but I didn't run. Her fur was coarser than I expected, cold to the touch. But beneath it, her skin twitched like she hadn't been touched in a very long time. I didn't push it, just left my hand there. UNMOVING. Then I sat again. The day moved around us. The light changed. The wind picked up. But still we stayed. Still. She stayed. By the third morning, the snow had settled into silence. Not heavy enough to blanket the ground, but enough to dull the edges of the world. Tire tracks softened. Footprints from the night before already fading, like no one had ever stood there at all. She was still there, and something had changed. It wasn't obvious at first. From the apartment window, she looked the same, curled at the base of the fence, still facing the swings, still unmoving. But when I opened the door to bring her food, I noticed it. A baby blanket, folded, soft yellow with tiny embroidered clouds, carefully laid beside her. Not dropped out, not blown there. Placed. She didn't touch it, didn't sit on it or pull it beneath her body for warmth. But she hadn't moved away from it either. It was there now, part of the scene, like the bowl, like the silence, like the weight in her eyes. And that blanket meant something. I crossed the parking lot slowly, boots leaving clean, crisp prints behind me. She raised her head when I got close, but she didn't rise. The overnight snow had dusted her fur in small specks. She looked like a statue now, something weathered and quiet and ancient. Her gaze flicked to the blanket, then back to me. I knelt beside it. The edges were slightly damp, but it was clean. Fresh, not from a garbage pile, and not from some act of random charity. I looked up at the third-story window. It was closed, curtains drawn, but someone inside had seen her. Someone had gone to the drawer, pulled out something small and soft, and laid it down, maybe not out of belief. Not yet, but out of recognition. And that was enough to shift something. I didn't reach for her this time. I just sat near the blanket, not quite touching it, not quite touching her. There was a reverence in it now, the way you'd sit near a grave or a shrine or a memory you weren't sure you had permission to name. She shifted once, turning her face slightly toward the window. A quiet glance, then back to the swing, The morning passed that way, 1 hour. Then 2. I brought her boiled rice and turkey shreds in a shallow dish. She ate them slowly, carefully. Still not trusting, but no longer trembling with hunger. No longer. Hollow-eyed and distant, she was beginning to settle. Not into comfort, but into wathfulness, says that as if something inside her had made a choice. That afternoon, I walked around the neighborhood. I asked quietly, carefully, not knocking on doors, not drawing attention. Just passing remarks at the corner store, at the laundromat, outside the small church that stood empty most of the week. Anyone lost a German shepherd? I asked, big dog, scar on her ear, then sleeping by the playground. No one had. She showed up last week, someone told me. Maybe longer. I saw her sniffing at a dumpster behind the gas station. She looked like a cop dog, someone else said. The kind that don't bark unless they mean it. She's still there? A third person asked. I figured someone would have taken her by now. I nodded. She's not leaving. They all looked at me the same way, half sympathetic, half wary. Like they didn't want to be the one to get involved. She's not chasing anyone. I offered gently. No, someone said, but that doesn't mean she's safe. I didn't argue. I just walked back the way I'd come, a quiet ache starting behind my ribs. I thought about what it means for something to stay. In a world where so much leaves, so much gives up, or gets pushed out, staying is a kind of miracle. Staying is a kind of violence too. Because to stay is to hurt. And she was staying, not for food, not for warmth, for something older than survival, something like love. That evening, just after dusk, I saw the child again. The apartment above the swing glowed faint orange from a single lamp. The curtains were drawn just slightly open this time, not wide, not enough to feel intentional, but enough. And in the soft wedge of light, the baby appeared. He wasn't standing this time. He was sitting. Blanket around his shoulders is the same blanket, I think. Or maybe another like it. He wasn't facing out exactly. Just turned slightly to the side, profile visible, head tilted toward the glass dot she was watching. She rose, slowly, carefully, as if her legs remembered pain. She stepped closer to the fence. Not directly beneath the window, she never got that. Close, but nearer, within sight line. Within reach of that invisible thread that had stretched between them for 3 days now. The baby pressed his hand to the glass again. A small shape. 5 fingers splayed wide. No words. No motion. Just a hand, and the dog she sat on. Stiff, not tense. Just a present. I don't know how long they stayed like that, but I stood watching from my window, unmoving, afraid to breathe too loud. It was as if time folded in on itself. No sound, but the occasional car far off, the slow groan of metal from the swings shifting in the breeze, and the low hum of something sacred settling into place. The next morning, she was gone. For 20 minutes. I panicked. It had been 3 days, and she'd never left, not once. Not beyond the fence. Not beyond the sight line of the window. But now, the blanket sat untouched. The bowl was empty. And the space beside the swing was vacant. The snow around it pristine, undisturbed. I searched the alley. A lot. I walked the perimeter of the building. Nothing. The silence was heavier than it had ever been. Not a peaceful hollow. Then I saw her, emerging from behind the dumpster, dragging something gently in her teeth. A stuffed elephant, tattered, dirt-smudged, but clearly once loved. She set it beside the blanket and lay back down. No ceremony. No glance at the window. Just the act itself. A gift. An offering. A memory she had carried from wherever she had come, maybe in her mouth for miles. Maybe tucked somewhere she returned to only when the moment was right. And now, it sat beside the baby's blanket. A gesture. A story without words. That night, the baby wasn't at the window, but the light was on. The swing swayed once. Just briefly. And the German shepherd lifted her head and didn't lie back down for a long, long time. It snowed again that night. Not the soft storybook kind, but the slow, heavy fall that makes everything feel forgotten. Street lights flickered like old memories trying to stay lit. Each flake landed without sound, muffling the world into stillness. She didn't move. She lay beneath the swing like always, her body curled tight but eyes open, always watching, always waiting. The stuffed elephant was still there beside her, now blanketed in white, its small threadbare ear bent sideways. The baby's blanket had been pulled slightly closer to her flank, not by her, I think, but by the wind. I watched her from the window longer than usual. There was something about the way she held herself now. Not fear, not exhaustion, but memory. She didn't sleep like other strays. She didn't twitch or spasm or sink into dreamlessness. Her body remained half tense, as though resting in shifts, one part asleep, the other still guarding something no one else could see. And the way she blinked slowly, like she was moving through memories as she breathed, I found myself wondering what she was seeing behind those eyes. Who had taught her to wait like this? Who had she once watched over with the same stillness she gave the window? There was no tag, no name, no answers. Only this ritual now, repeated each day. Wait. Watch. Return. On the fifth day, the snow had crusted. At the edges of hard, icy patches where the sun had tried and failed to warm the ground, the wind bit harder, stung sharper. But she remained. I came out that morning with a fleece-lined crepe pad, the kind used in kennels, thick but portable. I didn't bring it to comfort her, not exactly. I brought it because I didn't know what else to do. You start reaching for warmth when you're not allowed to offer words. She watched me approach. Her eyes were less guarded now, but not soft. Never soft. Her trust came in layers, and each one had to be earned in silence. I laid the pad beside her, a few feet from the blanket and the toy. I didn't expect her to move to it. I just wanted her to know it was there. She didn't shift, but her gaze flicked from the pad to the swing, then up to the third-story window. It was closed again. No light. No child. No hand against the glass. For the first time since she arrived, she let out a sound, not a bark, not a growl, a low, chest-deep whine, short, sharp, and so quiet I almost missed it. Then silence again. I crouched beside her. Her tail didn't wag, her ears didn't lift, but she didn't recoil when my hand hovered closer than usual. I haven't touched her yet. I didn't need to. Her eyes told me everything. She missed him. I didn't know how to shape it or the history or the reason, but it was as clear as the cold air between us. She had come here for that child. Not for food. Not for shelter. For him. Later that day, I heard yelling from downstairs, not loud, muffled through the floorboards, like a conversation barely being held together. A woman's voice, then silence, then something heavy dropped or thrown. The kind of silence that follows something breaking. I didn't go down. It wasn't my business, but I noticed the dog had shifted. She stood now, facing the building, head tilted ever so slightly. Listening. Like she knew those sounds too well. Like they meant something more than noise. Then she sat. Carefully. Facing forward. Again. Watching. Waiting. The tension in her body reminded me of someone reading a story they already knew the ending to, but still hoping this time it might turn out differently. That evening, just before the sun disappeared, the baby returned to the window. The curtains parted wider this time. Not fully, but enough to see the whole frame. His small body pressed to the glass again, 2 hands now, mouth slightly open, watching, and she rose with aching slowness. As if standing wasn't just physical, but emotional. She stepped to the edge of the fence. Stopped. Lifted her head. Didn't bark. Didn't move closer, just met his gaze, and in that moment, something happened I'll never forget. The child reached up and pressed something flat to the glass. Something square and white. A photograph. Just for a second, I couldn't see the image. It was too far, too quick. But I saw the shape. And I saw her reaction. The shepherd flinched. Not in fear. In recognition. Her ears pressed back. And she lowered her body slightly, as if bracing herself against something inside. Then she stepped forward. One step, then another. Not crossing the fence line, not climbing the stairs. Just closer. And she sat. Eyes on the child, chest rising and falling with silent, deliberate breath. And the child? He smiled, a faint, lopsided thing, then dropped the photograph. I saw it flutter too fast, caught in the draft between the window and sidewalk. It never made it to the ground. Instead, it lodged in the dead hedge below. She didn't retrieve it, but she saw where it landed. And from that moment on, she didn't return to her original spot beneath the swing. She began sleeping nearer the building. Closer to the hedge. Closer to him. That night I brought out a small battery-powered, low-glow lantern. I placed it near the crate pad, just enough light to keep her warm without startling her. As I approached, she didn't stand, but she watched. I sat with her. 2 feet apart, then one. I reached out slowly, palm open, breath steady. This time she didn't flinch when I touched her head. The fur was warmer than I expected. Thick, coarse at the top, softer near the ears. I scratched lightly behind the left one, the scarred one. She closed her eyes. Not fully, but enough. And we sat like that for a while. 2 silhouettes in the snow, one human, one hurting. Both holding something we hadn't spoken aloud. Somewhere behind us, a baby fell asleep, and the German shepherd laid her head on the snow-dusted pad for the first time. By the 6th day, the neighborhood had begun to notice. Not loudly, not all at once, but in quiet sidelong glances. On the way, people walked just a little slower past the playground fence. In the silence that followed when someone saw her and said nothing at all. The German shepherd had become a fixture now. Not a stray, not a threat, a presence, like the statue of something loyal left behind, or a shadow that stayed even after its owner was gone. She didn't roam, didn't wander. She still ate only what was offered, drank only what was warm, and returned every evening to the spot near the hedge below the baby's window. The photo was still caught there, crumpled in the tangle of dead twigs and snow. I hadn't touched it. Neither had she. But her eyes would flick toward it, briefly, each night before settling in, like a ritual, like grief with a rhythm. And though she'd let me near her, now allowed me to sit, to lay down food, even to rest my hand against her shoulder for short moments, her gaze always stayed fixed on the building, on that window, on the shape of the child behind the glass. That morning, I came out earlier than usual. There was a hush to the day, the kind that feels like the world is listening. The sky had turned the color of faded paper, not white, not gray, just blank. The kind of sky that waits. She was already sitting up, ears tilted forward, eyes locked on something above. I followed her gaze and saw the window open. Not wide, just a crack, a gesture. But it changed everything. The air shifted. She stood slow, deliberate, cautious as ever, but not afraid. The baby appeared, hands braced against the lower ledge, lips parted in awe or confusion or something softer, and in his hand was a crumpled sock. He dropped it, not by accident. He leaned forward, little fingers extended, and let it fall straight down into the hedge below. She stepped forward immediately, not running, not barking, just moving. A calm, purposeful walk to the base of the hedge. She nudged the branches once, then again. Then reached in and pulled the sock free. She carried it in her mouth, not chewed, not torn, and walked back to the blanket. She set it down beside the stuffed elephant and lay beside both. It wasn't about the sock. It wasn't about the object at all. It was the act. He had given her something, and she had accepted it. The distance between them, once impossible, now measured by gestures. Quiet exchanges, trust built in fragments, and I watched it all from the sidewalk. Heart heavy in the most unexplainable way. Not sad. Just full. Like watching something heal you didn't know was broken. Later that day, I walked past the property manager's office. He stepped out when he saw me. Lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. "Is she still out there?" he asked. I nodded. "She ain't gonna leave on her own." "No," I agreed. He looked away, jaw tight. "Animal control's been by twice. Said if they see her again, they'll take her." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "She hasn't hurt anyone," I said too quickly. "I know," he said, voice low. "That's not what this is about." "Then what is it?" He didn't answer right away. He took a drag. Exhaled slowly. The smoke curled like breath in the cold. "That apartment," he finally said, nodding toward the third floor. "The mom in 3B. She's been having a hard time." I stayed silent. He glanced at me. "Kid's father's gone." "Don't ask me." "Where?" "The place went quiet about 6 months ago." Something clicked faintly behind my ribs. "She doesn't talk to anyone," he added. "But I think the dog reminds her of something. Or someone." He flicked the ash into the snow. "Just keep your distance. If the city steps in, it won't end kindly." I watched him go, didn't follow, didn't speak. Just turned back toward the fence. Toward her. Toward the bond that no one seemed to understand but everyone could feel. That evening, I brought out a box. Not big. Just sturdy. Inside it. A clean towel, 2 dog biscuits wrapped in paper, and a photo. Not of her. Not of anyone she knew. Just a picture I'd clipped from an old magazine of a child hugging a dog, both curled. Beneath a tree in autumn. Warm tones. Safe shapes. I didn't know if it would mean anything, but something in me needed to offer it. I left the box beside the crate pad and sat down a few feet away. She approached slowly, sniffed once. Then twice. She looked at the photo last. Not long, but long enough to see it. Then she stepped into the box, circled once, and lay down. First time she'd accepted a shelter. First time she'd chosen comfort. And from the apartment window, behind the curtain, I saw the mother, just a glimpse. Silhouette. Holding the child. Not speaking, not crying. Just looking down. And for the first time, I thought maybe she saw it too. Not just a dog in the snow, but a memory returned. A bay. Promise. A presence that didn't leave. Just before midnight, I heard a sound at the door, not a knock. A scratch. Soft. Hesitant. I opened it, and she was there. The German Shepherd. No blanket. No box. Just her. Looking up at me. Waiting. I stepped outside. Closed the door behind me. Heart thudding without reason. She turned. Walked 2 paces. Stopped. Looked back. Then continued. I followed. Not quickly. Not like an owner follows a dog. Like someone being led. We crossed the parking lot. Moved through the gap in the chain-link fence. Down the narrow alley behind the laundromat. And then she stopped. There. Tucked beneath a burned-out porch light, sat something I hadn't seen before. A collar. Frayed. Flipped to a low branch of a dead shrub. She nosed it once. Then I stepped back. Let me see it. Let me understand. I knelt. Lifted it carefully. A day. Faintly. Engraved. The name is almost worn away, but still there. Immediately, I turned to her. She met my eyes. And for the first time I knew who she was. Not just a stray, not just a shadow, but immediately. And somehow, in some broken, holy way, she had found her way back to the only place that still held a piece of her story. It rained on the 7th morning. Not snow. Not sleet. Rain. Cold. Thin lines that traced every corner of the world like the softest kind of undoing. The snow began to melt around the edges of the sidewalk, revealing the dull, muddied truth of what had been hidden beneath its cigarette butts. Salt-stained concrete, half-dissolved footprints that belonged to no one anymore. But Mara stayed dry. She was curled in the crate box now, the fleece pad beneath her. The blanket pulled halfway over her hip, like it had been arranged in the night, by something other than the wind. The box had shifted slightly under the small awning I'd mounted off the side of the building. A thin sheet of plastic and rope meant more to say I see you than to offer real shelter. She was awake when I stepped out. She didn't rise. But she didn't lower her gaze either. I approached slowly, as I always did, careful not to speak. Words, I'd come to realize, had very little place in this kind of healing. Some stories could only be told through waiting. Through stillness, through presence. She watched me place the dish down scrambled eggs today, small pieces of toast soaked in warm water. She sniffed once. Then I began to eat. I sat near the base of the steps, and for a long while, the only sound was the rain tapping on plastic, on gravel, on skin. It was the kind of morning that asked nothing. No questions. No plans. Just the quiet acknowledgement that everything still hurt. But somehow, we were still here. Later that day, the window opened again, wider this time, the curtain pushed fully aside. And there he was, the child, now standing on the couch beside the ledge, both hands against the glass. Tiny nose nearly pressed flat. He was watching Mara. Again. But something had changed. This time he was laughing, soundless from where I stood, but unmistakable. His mouth opens in joy, small chest rising and falling in excitement, the kind of motion only children know is pure, unfiltered, without agenda. And Mara? She stood, walked to the edge of the crate, ears tilted forward, tail low and steady. She didn't bark. She didn't whine. She simply looked up, not just at him, but into him. Like she was recognizing something more permanent than flesh. Something she had carried across whatever distances had brought her here. They stayed like that, for minutes. And I swear in that silence it felt like the city itself paused to breathe. That afternoon, the mother stepped outside, the first time. I'd seen her up close. She moved slowly, hoodie pulled over unwashed hair, a diaper bag hanging off one shoulder. Her eyes were red, not from crying, from exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion you don't speak of, because there's no one left to hear it. She didn't notice me at first. She stepped toward the swing, stopped short when she saw Mara lying there again, blanket tucked beneath her flank. Mara didn't move. The woman hesitated. Then slowly crouched. Not close, but a number you, she said softly. Her voice was rough from disuse. You weren't supposed to come back. Mara lifted her head slightly, ears halfway back. The woman swallowed hard. You were his. She didn't say who he was. She didn't need to. Grief has a shape. It fits into silence like a key into a lock. I thought they'd taken you somewhere else, she whispered. And then, as if afraid of her own voice, she stood again, too quickly, too harshly. Mara didn't react. She just watched her go. And the woman didn't look back. But she had spoken, and Mara had heard. Something in the air shifted after that. Not clean, not resolved. But thinner. Like one layer of pain had peeled away. That night, I found the boy's toy car in the corner of the lot. Plastic. Blue, one wheel cracked. I picked it up, brought it to Mara's box, placed it beside the elephant. And the sock, she sniffed it. Then turned to face the window. I glanced up too. The baby was there again. This time, held gently against his mother's chest. She was standing just inside the frame, hair still damp, robe tied clumsily at the waist. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't even looking at the child. She was looking at the dog, and her eyes weren't red. This time. They were wet. The difference mattered. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke to the sound. A thud. Then, a soft, choked cry. I pulled on my coat and stepped outside without thinking. The rain had stopped. The air had gone still. I crossed the lot. Mara was already standing. She looked up at the window, then to me, then toward the side door of the building. It was open, just slightly. I heard it. Again, a whimper, not from her. From inside, I followed the sound quietly, deliberately. Mara walked beside me now, not in front, not behind, beside, like. We both knew whatever was waiting required. More than one heartbeat. We climbed the side stairs, turned the corner, and there half slumped. In the hall outside apartment 3B was the mother, eyes closed. Skin pale. Child in her arms, still breathing, but she wasn't. I dropped beside them, checked her pulse. It was there. Faint, thready, overdose. Maybe exhaustion, dehydration. I didn't know. I called for help. The paramedics came quickly, quietly. I stayed in the hallway with the baby, wrapped him in the blanket that Mara had once been given, held him until the lights dimmed and the hallway emptied. And Mara? She never left the stairwell, just watched, every second, every movement. And when they wheeled the stretcher past, she didn't flinch. She stepped closer and placed her nose gently against the edge of the sheet. One moment. Then I stepped back and sat. The mother survived. Barely. They kept her for observation. And the baby they gave him to Child Protective Services. Just for the weekend. They said. Just protocol. Just until someone could make a decision. I watched them walk him out. The carrier looked too large for his body, but his hands were still moving, reaching toward the window, toward the place where Mara always lay, but she wasn't there. She was at the curb, watching the car leave, eyes unblinking, tail still. No sound, no movement, just stillness, the kind that waits, the kind that remembers. And I knelt beside her. I whispered, "He'll come back. We'll find a way." She didn't look at me. But she leaned against my side and breathed. The rain returned the next morning. Not hard, not angry. Just enough to blur the edges of things. Windows fogged. Gutters whispered. The streets looked as if they'd forgotten how to shine. Mara didn't retreat. She sat at the edge of the parking lot, facing the corner where the city car had driven away the night before, the car that had carried the child, the blanket, and every sound she had waited for since the snow first fell. Her body was still, but something inside her had shifted. You could see it in the way she held her weight. Not low, not curled, not hiding. She sat up, spine long, ears forward, breath steady, as if the waiting had found a new purpose, as if her stillness had transformed from grief to watchfulness. She didn't eat that morning. I brought her warm oatmeal and broth and left it beside the box. Like always, she sniffed, but turned away. I didn't press her. Grief rearranges hunger. Sometimes it erases it. Sometimes it moves it deeper into the marrow where food can't reach. I sat beside her, under my coat. Neither of us spoke. The wind moved past us like a memory we hadn't yet earned the right to remember. And still, she stared down the road. The woman didn't return that day. The apartment stayed dark. A single piece of paper had been taped to the inside of the door, one of those emergency contact forms that makes everything feel colder. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence carries enough weight to be understood without translation. People came and went from the building. One older man asked if the dog was mine. I said no, not really. He nodded, then paused. She looks like she's waiting for someone. She is, I said. He didn't ask who, just looked once more and walked on. It was starting to happen, more than the small acknowledgments, the quiet nods. No one tried to move her now. No one asked if she was dangerous. She had become something. ELSEA sentinel. Maybe or a shadow of something people didn't want to name, but they felt it. We all did. The next morning, she followed me. I didn't notice at first. I'd left to get groceries of the small kind, just bread and canned soup, something warm for later. I walked with my head down, collar turned up against the rain. When I turned the corner near the laundromat, I saw her reflection, first low and dark and unmistakable in the store window glass. She was 10 feet behind. And me. Still, watching. She didn't approach, just stood there. Her paws wet from the walk, her fur darkened by the rain. I held the door open a moment longer than usual, She didn't enter, but when I stepped inside, I glanced over my shoulder, and she sat, facing the street. Guarding. It wasn't until I left the store 15 minutes later that I realized she had moved. Now she was at the mouth of the alley, watching both the entrance and the exit, her head low, her body angled just enough to shield. If it came to that, I didn't speak. I just passed her slowly and she turned and followed. Not close, not wagging, but near. I walked the 2 blocks home with the quiet sense that I was no longer walking alone. Later that evening, the child's sock was gone. I noticed it as the wind picked up again, just a glance toward the crate. A routine now, almost muscle memory. The blanket and the elephant remained. But the sock, the one he'd dropped from the window days before, was no longer there. I looked around the box. Around the lot. Nothing. I thought maybe the wind had carried it, until I saw her lying near the rear stairwell, and tucked gently beneath her front paw was the sock. Dry. Clean. Pressed against her chest like a heartbeat. She was trying to keep close. She opened one eye when I stepped near, but it didn't move. And I didn't touch it. Some things aren't meant to be recovered. Only witness. It was the day after that. When the social worker came, I recognized the car before I saw the badge. The kind of generic city vehicle that shows up when decisions are being made far above your head. She stepped out alone with no baby carrier. No bags, no clipboard. Just a raincoat and a look in her eyes like she had been carrying too many stories. In silence, I approached. She looked at me. "You're the one who's been watching the dog." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "She's not registered," the woman said gently. "No microchip, no owner on file, no history. She's not a stray." I didn't say she was. We stood there for a moment, both soaked at the edges of our coats. She glanced toward Mara. "She's been following the boy," she said. "The mother told us. Said she remembered the dog from before." "Before what?" She wouldn't say. Her voice softened. "But she said the dog showed up again a week ago. Said it meant something. Sighed she couldn't explain it. But the dog had found him." Mara was still lying by the stairwell, but her head lifted as we spoke. "She hasn't left the building," I said quietly. "Not since he was taken." The woman nodded. Then, almost to herself, she said, "We moved him to a new place today." My chest went still. "Where?" She didn't answer at first. Then, "Not far." That was all. Then she turned to go. Got in the car, paused halfway through closing the door. "You should know," she said. "The boy said the dog has a name." I looked up. He kept saying it, even though he could barely speak. Just one word, over and over. "What word?" Immediately, the door closed. And the car disappeared into the rain. That night, Mara didn't lie in her box. She stood by the gate, facing the street, eyes locked on the dark, beyond the lamplight. And when I stepped outside, blanket in hand, bowl in the other, she didn't turn toward me. But when I said her name just once, ears twitched. Not fast. But deeply. Like someone remembering a song they hadn't heard in years. And for the first time, she turned. Walked toward me. And rested her head against my knee. Not just trust, not just thanks, but something older, something that said, "You heard me. You know who I am. And now." We would wait together. Mara waited at the gate for 3 days. It didn't matter if the sun rose behind gray clouds or not at all. It didn't matter that rain turned the gravel to sludge, that her food stayed untouched until nightfall. She waited with the stillness of something etched from stone, not frozen, not stubbornly anchored. Each morning, I found her there, standing just beyond the metal bars, staring toward the mouth of the street where the child had disappeared. She didn't pace, didn't cry, just stood, unmoving, watching the place where the trail had gone cold. There's a kind of faith that doesn't ask questions. She carried it in every breath. I left water nearby, bits of cooked rice and soft chicken. Sometimes she'd eat. Sometimes not. I learned to stop coaxing. What she was waiting for didn't come in a bowl, On the fourth morning, she began to walk. Not far, just the length of the block, but it was the way she moved that caught me low to the ground, slow, silent, like she was retracing something no one else could see. She sniffed the sidewalk in long, deliberate lines, stopped at the crosswalk, waited as cars passed, then turned back. Every step was familiar to her, not curious, not random. Remembered. When she returned to the lot, she sat at the edge again, but something had shifted. Her eyes weren't locked on the horizon anymore. They flipped now between the door to the building and me. Between the street and the past. She was choosing something, or beginning to. That evening, I found her standing outside the building again, not near the box, not near the swing, but by the stairs that led to the second floor. Not pacing, just waiting. I stood at the doorway. She didn't move. I opened the door. She stepped inside. No sound, no hesitation. Her paws clicked once against the linoleum, then fell silent as she stopped at the bottom of the stairwell. I waited. Then I started up. She followed, step by step, not looking at me. Not leading. Just following. As if whatever she needed to find might only exist in the quiet act of staying close. We reached the second floor. She paused in the hallway, sniffed the air once, then without being told, curled beside the doormat. Not the mother's old unit. Not mine. The empty one, Unit 2A, vacant since December. The landlord had meant to repaint, but it still sat untouched. Mara lay there like she belonged to it, like it had once held a version of her she hadn't been able to protect. I crouched beside her. "It's not the same place," I whispered. "He's not here." She blinked slowly, but it didn't move. I sat with her until the hallway lights clicked off, and together, we listened to the silence. The next day, the mother returned, not for long, just long enough to pick up a duffel bag from her old apartment and hand in a set of keys. I watched her from the porch. She didn't look up, didn't speak, but her hand paused at the stair rail. She glanced toward the parking lot, toward the gate, toward Mara, and then she was gone. The door closed behind her with the softest kind of finality, one that doesn't slam. Just stops being open. That night, I left the gate unlocked. It wasn't a bold choice, more an accident of feeling the kind that happens when you stop keeping things out and start letting things in. Mara walked the block again after dark, but this time, I followed. Not closely, just enough to keep her in sight. She stopped outside. A new building, 2 stories, painted tan with peeling blue trim. A metal mailbox hung crooked on the front wall. She didn't approach it. Just sat. Across the street. Watching. I followed her gaze, and there through a half-open blind I saw him. The baby, still small, still silent, but safe. He sat on the floor near a rug, blocks scattered around him. A woman passed through the room behind him, older, gray hair pulled back, steady hands. Mara didn't move. She didn't approach the door. She didn't bark. She just watched. And when the boy lifted his head, looked up, almost as if he'd felt her, their eyes met, even across the distance, even through glass. And something settled in her shoulders. A breath released, not of relief, of understanding. He was safe. He was somewhere she couldn't go, but he was still here, and that, for now, was enough. She turned and walked back home. Next morning, the gate was open. She didn't stop at it anymore. She passed through. Came to rest beside the stoop of my building. And stayed, not out of loss, not out of need. But presence. She had found the line between guarding and letting go, and she chose to walk it. Each day, she would walk her quiet route past the laundromat, past the corner store, then pause outside the tan building. Always across the street. Always still. Always unseen. Then she would return. Sometimes she would sleep in her box. Sometimes beside my door. And once, I woke to find her on my porch chair, her body curled tight, head resting on the boy's sock like a memory she wasn't quite ready to give up. I didn't move her. I Made coffee and watched the world shift, just slightly around her. People passed and nodded. Now some dropped bits of food by her side. One woman left a bowl of water with flowers floating in it. No one called her stray anymore. She had become something else. Not just protectors, not just memory, but a reminder that love once given doesn't vanish. It waits. And when called by name, it returns. The weather turned warmer by degrees. Not all at once, just little shifts that only the observant would notice. A softer bite in the morning air. Fewer clouds clinging to the street lamps at dusk. The ground began to let go of the frost it had held like breath. And through it all, Mara remained. Each morning, she followed the same quiet path, first past my door, then to the fence where she'd once waited. She no longer sat there, just passed by, slow and deliberate. A memory walking through itself. Then onto the corner, across from the tan building. She never crossed the street, never barked, never tried to get closer, but she was there, and the child began to notice more than just her shape in the distance. He began to respond. He would point sometimes, press his face against the window. And one morning, he laid something on the sill. Something round and soft and blue. A pacifier. Old, chewed on the edges. Mara saw it. I know she did. But she didn't move. Her watching was no longer about possession or need. It was a ritual. A vow she was keeping. Even if the world no longer asked her to. People started to ask about her again. With suspicion, with familiarity. Is that the same shepherd from the winter? I saw her at the pharmacy. Just sitting there like she was waiting for someone. She doesn't have a leash? No. Then how does she know where to go? She just does. They'd nod then, slow and thoughtful, as if something they didn't want to say had just settled under their tongue, and they'd walk on. Children waved at her. Elderly neighbors left scraps of chicken or blankets near the porch. She never touched any of it until they'd gone. She remained a guest in the world, never asking for more than it chose to give. But people began to notice her, the way she sat beside the alley when the mailman came through, the way she followed from a respectful distance when the school bus dropped off the girl with the limp, the way she stood outside the corner shop when someone entered alone and only left when they were safe again under the sky. No one told her to do any of it, but everyone began to expect her presence just the same. She'd become something unspoken, a kind of guardian no one asked for, and everyone quietly depended on. It was late in the evening when the boy's new guardian stepped out onto her porch. Gray hair, stiff knees, strong voice. I'd seen her only once before, steadying the child as he wobbled across the rug, lifting him gently onto her lap like he weighed more than her own. Heartbreak. She didn't cross the street. Just stood there, arms folded. Eyes on Mara. And then after a long silence she raised one hand, palm outward, and let it fall to her chest. A silent thank you. Mara didn't respond, but she stayed longer than usual that night. Didn't move until the window went dark. Didn't turn back until the silence felt like permission. And then, one morning, something changed. A letter arrived, slipped under my door. No return address, just my name inside. A folded note on lined paper, in handwriting that leaned heavy and slanted. If that dog is still coming around, you should know someone reported her. Not sure who, but someone said she's wandering near a child's foster home. Sighed, she looks dangerous. They might come for her. I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time, not angry, not surprised. Just tired in the way people get when something sacred is mistaken for something broken. I stepped outside. The morning was cool and quiet. The sky is still gathering its light, and Mara was sitting on the porch. Waiting. She looked at me. And something passed between us. Not fear, not confusion. Just knowing that this fragile thing we'd built might not hold, that the world has rules, and sometimes rules don't make room for stories like hers. I made calls that afternoon. To the city shelter. To the veterinary. Clinic 2 towns over. To the woman I knew who worked with rescue groups on weekends. But it was always the same answer. No chip? No. Tag? No medical history? No foster license? Then a sigh. She's a stray, technically. And then, the part I already knew was coming. If someone files a complaint, there's nothing we can do. She's unregistered and unsupervised. Supervised. As if that word had anything to do with what Maria did. As if someone else could guide her. Better than the instinct that had brought her across God knows how many miles back to the side of a child who couldn't even speak her name out loud. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat with her under the awning. I brushed the mud from her paws. I whispered words I'd never used before about fear, about injustice, about how the world is too quick to punish loyalty when it comes without papers. She rested her head on my foot, and for the first time, I wanted to cry. Not for her, not for me, but for what people can't see when something doesn't fit their idea of ownership. Mara didn't belong to anyone, and that was exactly why she was irreplaceable. 2 days passed, then 3. No one came. The note had changed something in me. I began to take photos. Carefully. Quietly. Mara sleeping beside the crate box. Mara walking behind the child's foster home. Mara sitting at the pharmacy entrance, waiting for a woman with trembling hands to return. I printed them at the local store. Laid them out on my table, each one a silent testimony. Each one proof, not that she was mine, but that she mattered, that she had made herself essential to a world that had forgotten how to notice quiet things. That night, I heard footsteps at my door. I opened it. The woman, the foster guardian, stood there. She didn't speak. Just held out a photograph. One I hadn't taken. A Polaroid. The child, standing in the living room. Behind him Mara. Visible through the window. Child's hand was pressed to the glass. And in the photo, his mouth was open, mid-sound, mid-call, mid-word. The caption at the bottom read, written in pencil. Immediately, the woman looked at me. Whatever happens, she said softly, I'll tell them she isn't a stray. And Mara, from the porch behind me, stood up. And took one step closer. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I had just set Mara's bowl down beside the crate box when the phone vibrated in my pocket. A number I didn't recognize. The area code from the next county over. The woman on the other end didn't waste words. Animal Services, she said. There's been a report filed about a stray shepherd exhibiting protective behavior near a foster placement. Is this your address? My throat tightened. She's not a stray, I said quietly. She's been here for months. Is she licensed? No. Vaccinated? I don't know. There was a pause. Sir, she continued, not unkindly, we're not trying to take away anyone's pet. But when an unclaimed dog shows repeated proximity to a foster child's residence, and there's no documentation, we're obligated to investigate. I understand, I whispered. But I didn't. Not really. What was there to investigate? She had already made her case. In paw prints. In silence. I'm waiting. They said they'd be by that afternoon. I hung up the phone with numb fingers. Mara hadn't moved. She was lying beside the bowl, her chin resting gently on the edge of the porch step. Eyes trained on the street, like she knew something was coming. Like she could feel the shift in the wind. She didn't eat that morning, but she didn't walk away either. And somehow, that felt heavier than any protest she might have made. I spent the rest of the morning gathering what little I could. The photo from the foster guardian. The stack of pictures I'd printed and clipped. A brief letter I'd written late the night before explaining how she came. How she stayed, how she never once asked for anything except the right to remain near the boy. I knew it wouldn't be enough, but I needed to try. I placed everything in a folder, and then I waited with her. Not as her owner, not her voice, just as someone who had been changed in the presence of something quietly sacred. The hours passed slowly. The sun rose behind a veil of thin clouds. casting everything in a silvery half-light. Cars came and went. The world moved like normal. But the stillness around us remained. It always did. When Mara was waiting, the truck pulled into the lot just after 3. Unmarked, silver, with a cage in the back. I stood before she did. 2 officers stepped out, one older, one young. The older man carried a clipboard. The younger stayed behind him, watching Mara with a kind of careful distance. Not fear. Not judgment, caution. "She's right there," I said softly. The older officer nodded. "Name?" he asked. Immediately. "He." Wrote it down. Then I looked at her. She didn't move. Didn't growl, didn't flinch. Just watched. He stepped closer. Slow. She rose to her feet, not as warning but as dignity. As if saying, "If you're going to take me, you're going to do it with my eyes on you." "She's not chipped," I said. "I already checked. But she's not a stray. She came back. She found a child." The man glanced at me. Then flipped the page on his clipboard. "I've read the notes," he said, "including the letter the foster guardian submitted this morning." My heart lifted slightly. "She said the dog has been near the property every day for weeks," he continued. "That the child has bonded with her." He looked at me again. "You know what that means in this case?" I shook my head. "It means this isn't just a stray anymore. It means if someone steps forward, someone who can legally speak for her, we have options." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He turned to Mara, kneeling slowly. He reached out a hand low. "Open-palmed." She sniffed it once. Then I stepped back. Not afraid. Just resolved. "She's been through something." He murmured, "You can see it in her eyes." I nodded. "She came from somewhere," I said. "But wherever it was, she left it behind for him." He stood. "You want to take responsibility for her?" "Yes. You understand what that means?" "I do." He didn't. "Press further." Just turned to the younger officer. "Put the net away." And just like that, they didn't take her. The foster guardian came later that night. She didn't knock. Just stood near the bottom step, holding the child in her arms, wrapped in a navy coat 2 sizes too big for him. He was quiet, as always, but his eyes were wide. Alive. He looked around until he saw her. Immediately. Still on the porch. Still waiting. When their eyes met, he reached. Not frantically, not urgently. Just with a small, steady hand that had learned what it meant to want without demanding. Mara stepped forward. And the child's fingers found her fur. He didn't smile, but he breathed deeper. As if something missing had clicked back into place. The woman looked up at me. "I can't keep him," she said softly. "They're moving him again." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "No reason that makes sense," she said. "Just paperwork. The kind that forgets the shape of living things." She knelt down, letting the boy's hand trail along Mara's side. "I wanted him to see her one more time." Mara didn't move, but she pressed her body slightly forward. Not pushing. Just being there. The child leaned into her. And for a long, silent moment, the world felt whole. Later, after they left, I found something on the porch. The coat, left behind intentionally. Inside the pocket, the photograph of the boy. Hand to the window. And a note. "Keep her close. Someone will need her again." I folded the paper slowly and looked at Mara. She was lying on the porch, her head on the child's coat, eyes open, breathing steady. And I understood something then, something I hadn't been ready to believe before. She had not just come back for one child. She had come back because that's what she did. She found the ones the world didn't see, and she stayed until they were safe, even if she couldn't stay with them, even if it broke her. That night, I sat beside her until the streetlights flickered out, and when I finally stood, she followed me inside, for the first time. No leash. No command. Just trust, and the quiet sound of paws crossing the threshold of a place that was finally ready to be called home. The house was still the first night she stayed inside. No paw steps on the floorboards, no curious sniffing, no circling in corners or pawing at closed doors. Just the sound of her breath, slow, deliberate, and the occasional stretch of limbs as if even rest had to be earned. She lay near the door, not curled like a house dog, but coiled like something still half outside, still listening for whatever might come through the walls. I didn't try to bring her closer, didn't offer her the couch, or the bed, or the quiet comfort people usually think dogs are waiting for. She hadn't come for that. She had come for something else. Something harder to name. So I let her choose, and in the silence that filled the space between us, something settled. Not peace, but a kind of permission. By morning, she had moved. Not far, just to the edge of the hallway that led to the bedroom. Her body stretched along the cool floor, her muzzle facing the open door. Guarding. Not sleeping. Watching. Always watching. Boy didn't come back. They moved him that Friday. No warning. No visit. Just a file closed, a number erased, a door shut by a system too large to see what it was doing. Only knew he was gone because the curtain didn't open that morning. The window stayed still. No fingerprints on the glass. No sock on the sill. Just the hollow light of a room emptied too soon. Mara walked to the corner that afternoon like always. Sat on the sidewalk across the street. But when she looked up, there was no face in the window. Just her own reflection, faint in the glass, as if even her memory of him had begun to disappear. She stayed for a long time, longer than usual. And when she returned, she walked more slowly. Not broken. Just changed, like something had finished inside her and left a space behind. That night, she didn't sleep near the door. She lay at the foot of the bed, her body pressed lightly against the frame. As if, for the first time, she had nowhere else to be. The days became softer after that. Not easy, but softer. She stopped walking the block. She stopped waiting at the gate. Instead, she began to explore with me, following me to the store, to the park, to the mailbox where leaves gathered in forgotten corners. People greeted her by name now. Mara. They'd say like a prayer, still watching over us? She would nod, not with her head, but with her body. A shift of her weight, a pause in her stride. And then move on. Children asked to pet her. Sometimes she allowed it. Sometimes she simply stood beside them until they finished their story, then walked away without a sound. She became part of the fabric here, not owned, not claimed, but known. And in being known, she began to heal. One morning, she found something in the alley behind the church. I heard her low bark, the first I'd ever heard, and followed the sound around the corner. She was crouched near a pile of rags and cardboard. Behind it, a kitten. Gray, thin, eyes wide and wet with crust, barely old enough to walk. Mara didn't move when I approached. She just looked up at me. And then back down. As if to say, here, this one now. We took the kitten in, named her Ash. Mara never let her get too far, but she didn't smother either. She simply made room. In the house. In the silence. In the story. Ash would sleep curled between Mara's paws most nights. A tiny heartbeat pressed against the chest of something that had once stood alone in the snow. Now, she did not stand alone. She shared the warmth she had once refused. Weeks passed. Spring began to color the edges of the street. Grass pushed through cracks in the sidewalk. Windows opened. People smiled without knowing why. Mara stayed. Not as a guardian now. As something else. A witness. A presence. Tethered is something the world forgot too easily. That loyalty is not a trait, it's a decision. One made quiet, every day, in the way she stood between people in pain. On the way, she walked beside the boy once, and then returned, even when he didn't. In the way she stayed, not because she had to, but because it was right. One afternoon, I brought out the box I'd kept sealed since winter. Inside were the pieces of her beginning. The torn collar I'd found in the hedge. The crumpled photograph from the boy's window. The coat they left behind. And something else I hadn't dared open until now was a small envelope taped to the underside of the box. The handwriting was shaky. not the foster mother's, the child's biological mother, the one who'd vanished quietly into the space left behind by grief. Inside the envelope, a single note, scribbled in pencil. She used to sleep beside the crib. Wouldn't leave it, not even when he cried. When the fire started, I thought she hadn't made it out. But I heard her barking from the other side of the fence. She brought him to the neighbor's porch. Then I ran. I thought she'd forgotten us. I didn't know dogs could remember. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I know now. I folded the papers slowly and looked over at her. Mara lay in the sun beside the window, eyes half closed. Paws stretched out in front of her. The kitten was curled on her back, purring softly, and Mara was smiling. Not in the way people smile, but in the way dogs do with their breath, with their weight, with the stillness they carry when nothing is chasing them anymore. I didn't say the words out loud. I didn't need to. She already knew. She had always known. That night, as the sky dimmed indigo, I lit a single candle by the front door. Mara lay beside it, ash curled in her belly, and I sat with them, one hand resting on her shoulder, the other on the floor. No music. No words. Just the sound of night moving through the trees. And for the first time since the child was taken, Mara closed her eyes fully and slept. Not as a dog who was waiting, but as one who had stayed. The candle burned out sometime, before dawn. When I woke, the room was still that kind of gentle stillness that doesn't feel empty, just complete. Mara hadn't moved from the spot beside the door. Ash was curled against her flank, rising and falling with the rhythm of a kitten's dreaming. And for a moment, the whole house breathed in unison. No tension. No waiting. Just quiet. The kind that lingers when something unspoken has been made whole. Outside, the first gold of morning touched the windows. It poured across the floorboards like warmth finally remembered. The wind moved softly through the trees, nothing urgent. Just the day arriving like it had somewhere to go. I stepped to the window. The street was still wet from the night's rain, but the sky had cleared. A new kind of blue stretched wide and high, pale at the edges, deepening toward the center. It looked like it had been scrubbed clean, and something in me felt ready. Not to move on, but to be still in a new way. To stay. Mara rose mid-morning, slow and deliberate, her joints unfolding like she'd slept longer than she meant to. She stretched, shook once, then padded toward the porch. Ash followed her, tail held high. I stood back and let them pass, not as a keeper, but as someone lucky enough to have been chosen by presence. She paused at the door, turned her head slightly, and looked at me. Not waiting for permission, just checking in. The way only animals do is to say they remember, you're there, that they still see you, that you still matter. And then she stepped into the light. The porch was warm from the sun. She walked its length once, then curled on the far side where the light hit the railing and the breeze carried the scent of the street. Ash climbed into her paws again, purring like she'd known Mara her whole life. And together, they watched the morning unfold. It wasn't long after that the letter came. Not from the system, not from a lawyer, from a post office, box 3 towns over. No return name, just a folded note and a photograph. The photograph showed the boy slightly older, a little more hair now, face still quiet but no longer vacant. He stood beside a small tree, one hand resting on its trunk, the other clutching something soft and blue. The pacifier, still intact, still his. The note read, "He asks for her sometimes. Says her name like it means home. We can't bring him back. I'm sorry, but I thought you should know he's safe. He's being loved." I closed the letter with careful fingers. Walked outside. Mara was lying in the grass now, stretched long beneath the shade. I knelt beside her, pressed the photo gently to her side, let her sniff it. She didn't react the way I expected. No tilt of the head. No low whine, just a long blink. Slow and reverent, like something inside her recognized the peace behind the image. She nudged the photo once, then rested her head back on her paws, and I knew She understood dot he was okay, dot he was gone, but he was okay. The summer passed like that, dot soft days, quiet evenings. Mara took to following me without command, now just a natural rhythm between us. She would walk to the cafe 2 blocks down, wait by the door while I ordered, then escort me home like it was her appointed task. Sometimes she would pause by the playground, not the one she'd first slept beside, that one had long since been cleared out and rebuilt, but a new one, with bright colors and padded mulch, safer and less sharp. She'd sit at the edge while children played, never entering, never interfering, just a present. Some noticed her, others didn't, but she stayed all the same. Her presence was no longer rooted in one child. It had become something else, an offering to the world. In the evenings, she took to sitting by the fence again, the same one. The swing was gone now, rusted and removed, but the chain still hung limp from the top bar, a small ghost of the past that hadn't quite let go. She would sit there until the sun dipped low. Sometimes I'd sit with her. Other times, I'd let her have the moment to herself. There's a kind of remembering that can't be shared. One evening, I brought a blanket out to the grass beside her. Ash followed. We sat in silence. The breeze moved through the high leaves. A bird called from the wires overhead, and Mara simply watched. When the sun finally touched the horizon, she stood, walked to the base of the swing's frame, and laid down once more. Not in grief, not waiting, but in return. One morning, she didn't wake with the sun. She stayed curled beneath the window, fur warm with sleep, chest rising slow and steady. I let her be. Midday passed. She stirred, but it didn't rise. I brought water to her side. She drank, then rested again. That evening I sat with her. Ash curled close. The world softened around us, not in darkness, but in a kind of glowing hush. And in that hush, Mara exhaled deeper than I'd ever heard. Not labored, not struggling. Just final, a release, a surrender. As if she had carried something to the end of its road, and now she could set it down. She passed quietly 2 mornings later. In her sleep. No sound. No fear. No final act of drama. Just gone, like fog burned away by morning light. I buried her near the fence. Under the tree, beside the swing's old frame. Wrapped in the coat the child had left behind. Ash watched from the porch. A small figure in shadow. The photo of the one the guardian had sent, I folded into the coat. Not for her, for me, because some memories deserve to stay close to the ones who held them. I marked the spot with a smooth stone. On it, one word. Immediately. And beneath it, etched by hand, she stayed, even when she could have left. Especially then. The baby swing never creaked again. The wind passed it without pulling. As if it, too, knew something had been resolved. And sometimes, when I walk past the fence now, I swear I see her. Not with my eyes, but in the pause between heartbeats. In the way the grass parts gently. In the hush that follows the laughter of children. She is there. Not watching anymore. Not waiting, just resting. At peace.